The night my daughter called me crying from a porch in 14-degree weather, I was 78 minutes away, standing ankle-deep in water from a failed main line. Maya was 16. She had on a thin Christmas sweater. Her coat was still inside the Langford's house, where 40 people were eating, drinking, and laughing. She was outside because she had told her grandfather to stop making fun of me. What none of them knew was that the field operations guy they had spent 8 years looking down on owned Northline Facilities Group. The same company that paid salaries to dozens of people connected to their family. Last year, Northline cleared $18.4 million in revenue. Richard Langford had mocked my truck, my boots, and my work for years without realizing how many paychecks in his orbit carried my signature. I had kept that secret because my wife asked me to. That Christmas Eve, with Maya sobbing through my phone, I decided the secret had lasted long enough. My name is Evan Mercer. I was 43 years old, and I had spent most of my adult life building something with my hands before I ever learned how to build it on paper. I started Northline Facilities Group in 2012 with $22,000 in savings, a used service van, a contractor's license, and more confidence than I probably deserved. At first, it was just me. HVAC calls, leaking commercial lines, emergency maintenance, small property managers who needed someone willing to answer the phone at 2 in the morning. Then one contract became 3. 3 became 15. By the time Maya was in middle school, Northline had regional crews, commercial accounts across the Denver metro area, and enough employees that I no longer knew every technician's kid's name. The year before that Christmas, we had 126 employees and brought in about $18.4 million. I was proud of that. Quietly. Natalie came from a family that understood pride differently. The Langfords cared about titles, neighborhoods, schools, what kind of shoes you wore to dinner. Richard, her father, had spent most of his career in corporate logistics and somehow came out of it believing that a man's value could be measured by whether his shirt had a collar. The first time Natalie brought me home, I wore work boots and drove my old Chevrolet Silverado. The rear bumper already had a dent in it. Richard looked through the front window, then at me. "So what do you do?" Before I could answer, Natalie said, "He runs field operations." That was not technically false. I did run field operations. I also owned the company. Richard nodded like the answer confirmed something for him. Good honest work. The way he said it made it sound like a consolation prize. I let it go. That was the first mistake. After Natalie and I got married, she asked me to keep letting her family believe I was an employee. "They're complicated," she said. "That means what?" "It means Dad gets weird about money, about status. If he knows you own the company, everything changes." Would that be bad? For me? Yes. She took both my hands. "Please, just let me handle my family." I was in love with her. So I agreed. I told myself I did not need Richard's approval. I told myself knowing who I was should be enough. What I did not understand was that every year I stayed quiet, I was teaching Natalie something too. That I would shrink myself if it made her life easier. That I would absorb embarrassment before I made her uncomfortable. And that if her family kept pushing, I would probably keep taking it. For 8 years, they were right. 8 years sounds like a long time until you realize how quietly resentment can accumulate. It was never one enormous humiliation. It was 43 family dinners, Christmases, birthdays, Easter brunches, Cookouts where Richard would look at my Silverado and say something like, "Still haven't upgraded that contractor special?" Then laugh like we were both in on the joke. I usually smiled. Passed the food. Changed the subject. Natalie always gave me the same look afterward. Thank you. Like enduring her father was another favor I was performing for the marriage. Then the Langfords started appearing at Northline. Trevor was first. Natalie said her cousin needed something stable after a sales job fell apart. I hired him into procurement. Then Blake needed work. Then a nephew named Jason. After that came cousins, spouses, family friends, and people Richard personally recommended because, according to him, they were good people who just needed someone to give them a chance. I kept giving chances. By the 8th year of our marriage, 39 Northline employees had some connection to the Langford family. Not all of them were bad employees. Some were excellent. A few barely knew Richard. That almost made the situation easier to ignore. I could tell myself this was networking. Community. Family helping family. Then I would sit across from Richard at Thanksgiving while he explained that men in real management eventually stopped crawling under buildings. He had no idea the salary of the nephew sitting beside him came from me. Neither did Elaine when she once offered to help Natalie buy me something presentable for a charity dinner. I handed the envelope back unopened. Thank you, but I'm good. And I meant it. That was the part one hated remembering later. I wasn't secretly plotting revenge. I wasn't waiting for some grand reveal. I genuinely wanted peace. I told myself their opinion had no effect on my actual life. But silence has a cost, even when you can afford it. Every time I let Richard disrespect me without correcting him, I made the next insult easier. Every time Natalie brought another relative into Northline, I let our marriage move one step deeper into my company. And every time I chose peace over boundaries, the Langfords learned the same lesson. Evan would take it. Until Christmas Eve, when the person paying for my silence stopped being me. Christmas Eve was supposed to be one of the rare nights I left work early. At 7:41 p.m., a main water line failed at a commercial property Northline serviced outside Denver. One of my on-call technicians, Luis Moreno, got there first. He called me after opening the mechanical room. "Evan, I need you to see this before I isolate the whole building." I called Natalie. She and Maya were already at her parents' house. "I'm going to be late." Natalie sighed. "How late?" "Maybe 90 minutes. Depends what we find." "Of course." That was all she said. By 8:50, I was kneeling beside a ruptured line with water running into a floor drain and my sleeves soaked almost to the elbows. At 9:07, my phone lit up. "Maya." I almost let it ring because both hands were filthy. Then something in me said answer. "Hey, kiddo." For a second, all I heard was wind. Then, "Dad." Her voice was shaking. I stood up immediately. "What happened?" "Can you come get me?" "Where are you?" "Outside." I stopped moving. "Outside where?" "Grandpa's porch." I looked toward Luis. He saw my face and took the wrench out of my hand without asking. "Maya, why are you outside?" She tried to take a breath. "Grandpa started making jokes about your truck again. The Silverado. The dented bumper." The same joke Richard had recycled for years. He said, maybe Mom should finally buy you something that didn't look like it belonged behind a hardware store. I closed my eyes. And I told him to stop. Her voice cracked. I said it wasn't funny anymore. What did he do? He said I was disrespecting him in his own house. A gust of wind hit the phone. Then she said, he opened the door and told me I could come back inside when I was ready to apologize. I checked the weather app without thinking. 14-degree F. Maya, where's your coat? Inside. What are you wearing? My Christmas sweater. I felt the anger arrive. Not hot. Cold enough to make everything around it clearer. Where is your mother? Silence. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. Then. She knows. That hurt worse than anything Richard had done. What did she say? Maya whispered. She said I should just apologize so everyone can enjoy Christmas. I was already grabbing my keys. Maya, listen to me carefully. Okay. Stay on the porch where there's light. Do not walk anywhere. Keep your hands under your arms and keep moving your feet. Dad. I'm coming. You're really far away. I know. Louise pointed toward the exit. I've got the line. I nodded once. Then I spoke into the phone. And Maya? Yeah. You did nothing wrong. I left the building with water still dripping from my sleeves. For 8 years, I had let Richard Langford disrespect me because I thought I was the only person paying for that choice. That night, I found out I wasn't. The drive to the Langfords' house should have taken a little over an hour. It felt longer. I drove faster than I normally would, but every time the anger pushed my foot down, I forced myself to back off. Maya needed her father. She did not need me wrapped around a guardrail somewhere between Denver and Cherry Hills. When I finally turned onto Richard Street, the houses looked almost theatrical. White roofs. Christmas lights. Perfect wreaths. Warm windows. Then I saw Maya. She was standing at the far end of the porch with her arms folded tight across her chest. Her backpack sat beside her feet. She looked smaller than 16. I parked crooked, left the engine running, and crossed the yard. The second she saw me, her face broke. Dad. I pulled off my coat and wrapped it around her. Her hands were ice cold. How long? I don't know. Maya. Maybe 40 minutes. I looked through the front window. People were still eating. Richard stood near the dining room holding a drink. Elaine was laughing at something. And Natalie was beside the kitchen entrance with a champagne flute in her hand. She had been inside the whole time. Maya grabbed my sleeve. Can we just go? We will. I picked up her backpack. First, I'm getting your coat. I walked to the front door. Natalie opened it before I knocked. Her expression was not worried. It was irritated. Evan, don't make a scene. I stepped past her into the foyer. The room slowly went quiet. 30 or 40 faces turned toward me. I saw Maya's coat hanging over a chair and took it. Then Natalie said, "Actually, there's something you need first." She disappeared into the hallway and returned holding a thick manila envelope. She pressed it into my chest. I caught it. What is this? Divorce papers. Nobody spoke. Natalie's voice was steady enough that I knew this had not been decided tonight. I'm done, Evan. I looked at her. She continued. I want you out of the house tomorrow. Richard smiled from beside the fireplace. Best decision she's made in years. A few people looked uncomfortable. Nobody challenged him. Richard raised his glass toward me. Maybe now she can find somebody who doesn't show up to Christmas smelling like a boiler room. Someone laughed. Then he glanced through the open doorway toward Maya. And maybe you can finally replace that junkyard truck before it leaves both of you stranded. I looked at Natalie. You let our daughter stand outside in 14-degree weather. She was being disrespectful. She's 16. She needed to apologize. To your father. Natalie folded her arms. This is exactly what I mean. Everything with you becomes dramatic. That sentence did something final inside me. Not explosive. Final. I tucked the divorce papers under my arm. For 8 years, I had mistaken silence for patience. Compromise for loyalty. Humiliation for something a strong man should simply be able to absorb. Then I looked at Natalie. Then I guess it's time. Her face shifted. Just slightly. She had expected an argument. Maybe begging. Maybe anger. I gave her none of it. I walked back outside. Maya was waiting beside the Silverado. I handed her the coat. She climbed in. I got behind the wheel. As we pulled away, the Langford house disappeared in the mirror beneath thousands of dollars of Christmas lights. They thought they had just thrown out a field operations guy and his difficult daughter. For the first time in 8 years, I had no reason to correct them. Not yet. Maya fell asleep 20 minutes into the drive. I booked a hotel from a red light. Nothing fancy. 2 beds. A heating unit that rattled every time it kicked on. I waited until Maya was asleep before opening the envelope Natalie had handed me. The petition was thorough. That was the first thing I noticed. Not emotional. Prepared. A family law attorney named Stephen Caldwell had drafted it. I searched him on my laptop. High-asset divorce work. 14 years in practice. This was not something Natalie had arranged between dinner and dessert. The petition requested temporary possession of the house, a substantial share of our liquid assets, and support based on my reported income. Then I reached the paragraph describing my employment. Executive-level salaried employee at a regional facilities services company. I read it twice. Northline was never named. My ownership was never mentioned. There were only 2 possibilities. Either Natalie still did not understand what I actually owned, or she understood perfectly and had decided not to write it down. I did not know which one was worse. The house was described as the marital residence. The filing said nothing about Mercer Property Holdings purchasing it before the marriage. Nothing about title. Nothing about the corporate payments tied to the property. I stopped reading like a husband. I started reading like a businessman reviewing a bad contract. Claims. Omissions. Dates. Language chosen carefully enough to matter later. At 11:53 p.m., I closed the divorce petition. Then I opened Northline's employee directory. For the first time in 8 years, I searched every employee connected to the Langford family. 39 names appeared. I stared at the list for a long time. Then I opened the compliance system. I want to be precise about what happened next. I did not fire 39 people because I was angry at my wife's family. I did not even suspend anyone that night. What I did was run a preliminary compliance review across 39 employee files connected to the Langfords, covering the previous 36 months. Northline already had the software. We used it for quarterly expense audits, vendor reconciliation, fleet tracking, and procurement reviews. I entered the parameters just after midnight. Then I waited. The system took a little over an hour to compile the first report. Maya was asleep 3 feet away. I made hotel coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard and started reading. 28 files were clean. I separated them immediately. Good attendance. Normal expense patterns. No vendor conflicts. Nothing that justified dragging them into somebody else's mess. 11 files were different. Trevor Langford's was the first one that made me sit forward. Procurement supervisor. Fleet card and fuel discrepancies totaling approximately $38,700. Charges appeared on weekends when assigned company vehicles were logged hundreds of miles from scheduled jobs. There were hotel purchases attached to fuel records. Vacation routes. Repeated manual overrides. Then Blake Langford. Vendor processing. 6 duplicate invoice sequences tied to 2 small vendors. Estimated exposure. $74,600. The payments had been routed through slightly altered invoice numbers and near-identical descriptions. It was not proof of theft yet, but it was enough to demand an independent review. Richard's name appeared too. Not as an employee. As the beneficiary of several expenses submitted as client entertainment. Golf. A resort weekend. Restaurants. None of the corresponding client notes mentioned him. By 3:18 a.m., I had 11 flagged files. I did not label anyone a thief. I did not write termination letters. I preserved the records, locked the audit output to the encrypted server, and restricted modification access. Then I looked again at the 28 clean files. Those people mattered too. If I was going to do this correctly, blood relation could not become evidence. That was the line. Conduct mattered. Documentation mattered. Being a Langford did not. I had spent 8 years letting family politics blur the edges of my company. That night was the first time I started separating them again. I called Mason Reed at 3:41 in the morning. He had been Northline's corporate attorney for almost 9 years and had the useful personality of a man who treated panic like an administrative error. He answered on the 4th ring. Evan, I need you awake. I'm awake now. I told him everything. Maya on the porch. Natalie's divorce papers. The 39 Langford-connected employees. The 11 files I had flagged. Trevor's fuel records. Blake's duplicate invoices. Richard appearing inside questionable entertainment expenses. Mason let me finish. Then he said, "You're angry." Yes. Good. Keep it out of the paperwork. That pulled me up short. What do we do? First, preserve everything. Nobody edits files. Nobody deletes emails. Nobody gets advance warning. I already locked the audit output. Good. He continued. Second, the 11 flagged employees do not get fired because you saw irregularities at 2 in the morning. I looked at the laptop. They stay working? Not necessarily. HR can place appropriate people on administrative leave or restrict financial system access while an independent review happens. That made sense. I hated that it made sense. Third, I'm bringing in Grace Chun. Who? Forensic accountant, CPA, certified fraud examiner. She'll validate the numbers before we accuse anyone of theft. And Trevor? Blake. If the evidence holds, HR handles employment consequences. If Grace finds criminal conduct, we refer it. I leaned back in the hotel chair. What about Natalie? That goes through family counsel. She says the house is hers. Mason paused. The house is titled through Mercer Property Holdings, acquired before the marriage. That gives us a strong separate property position. So she has to leave? No. His answer was immediate. We don't do self-help evictions during a divorce. We preserve the ownership record, respond to the filing, and let the proper court process decide occupancy. I rubbed my eyes. For the first time that night, the anger had somewhere to go besides my chest. Mason's voice softened slightly. Evan, you have enough legitimate problems here. Don't create new ones because you want one satisfying morning. I looked at Maya sleeping across the room. What I want is for this to stop. Then do it clean. He paused. Justice, not theater. By 4:07 a.m., I had stopped thinking about revenge. I was thinking about process. And process was something I understood. I slept for maybe 2 hours. At 8:32 the next morning, I walked into Northline's headquarters wearing the navy suit I kept in my office for lender meetings and large commercial presentations. Nobody there knew what had happened at Christmas dinner. That was intentional. Omar Bennett, my HR director, was waiting for me with Mason on speakerphone. Grace Chun had already begun reviewing the 11 flagged files. Until she completed the financial analysis, Omar restricted system access for the employees whose roles involved company money, purchasing, fleet cards, or vendor payments. Trevor and Blake were placed on paid administrative leave. Not fired. Not accused publicly. Just removed from positions where records could be altered while the review continued. At 9:11, my phone rang. Richard Langford. I let it ring twice. Then answered. Evan. His voice came through warm and aggressive at the same time. The tone he used when he wanted something but still needed me to understand, he considered himself above asking. Some idiot at Northline locked Trevor and Blake out this morning. I said nothing. They've been told they're under some kind of investigation. Apparently several other people got the same notice. Correct. Richard paused. You know about this? Yes. Good. Then give me the number for whoever runs HR. Or your boss. Somebody with enough authority to straighten this out. I looked through the glass wall of my office. Omar was speaking with our compliance manager 20 feet away. You already have the right number. Silence. What? You're speaking to the person with final authority. Another pause. Longer this time. Evan, don't play games. I'm not. I leaned back. Northline Facilities Group. I founded it in 2012. Nothing. I'm the sole shareholder and chief executive officer. I could hear breathing on the other end. That's not true. It is. But Natalie said you ran field operations. I do. You told us you worked there. I do. You never said. You never asked. Richard went completely quiet. For 8 years, that man had treated my job like something I should apologize for. Now I could almost hear him rebuilding every conversation in his head. Trevor's salary. Blake's position. The cousins Natalie had referred. The people Richard himself had recommended to some supervisor he assumed should be grateful for the connections. He finally said, "So this audit is because of last night?" No. I kept my voice even. The review covers 36 months of company records. 11 files showed irregularities serious enough for independent investigation. Trevor would never steal from anybody. I didn't say he did. You suspended him. I restricted access while a forensic accountant reviews approximately $38,000 in questionable fleet and fuel activity. Richard stopped talking. And Blake? Approximately $74,000 in duplicate vendor payments. That's ridiculous. Grace Chun will determine that. Who is Grace Chun? A CPA and certified fraud examiner. His voice dropped. Evan, listen to me. We can handle this as a family. No. Don't do this. I'm not doing anything to your family. I looked down at the audit summary. I'm reviewing my company. He tried another angle. What about Natalie? She says you're trying to throw her out of her own house. My attorneys are handling the property issue through family court. Her own house, Evan. The court can decide that. Richard breathed hard into the phone. For once, volume was not giving him control. Then he said the word I had heard from him more times than I could count. Be reasonable. I almost smiled. I am. I ended the call. Within a minute, my phone started lighting up. Cousins. Uncles. Numbers I did not recognize. People who had spent years believing I was the least important man in every Langford room suddenly needed my attention. I turned the phone face down. Then I noticed one text that had arrived before Richard called. Unknown number. I know how long Natalie has been planning the divorce. She knows exactly who owns Northline. We need to talk. Asterisk asterisk. I stared at the text for almost a minute before doing anything. My first instinct was to ignore it. My second was better. I forwarded it to Mason. He called me 9 minutes later. Do you recognize the number? No. Give me a little time. 43 minutes later, he called back with a name. Rachel Monroe. 46 years old. Former independent document preparation contractor who had done project work for Stephen Caldwell's office and several private clients around Denver. More importantly, she had worked directly with Natalie the year before. Rachel had ended that engagement 13 days ago. I called her from my office. She answered immediately. Mr. Mercer? Yes. She sounded nervous. I need to say this before anything else. I'm not asking you for money. I'm not trying to get involved in your divorce. I'm calling because I was asked to certify something I believed was misleading, and I refused. What was it? A summary of your business interests. My grip tightened around the phone. What business interests? Northline. The room seemed to narrow. How long has Natalie known? Rachel exhaled. At least as long as I've known her. When was that? 13 months ago. I looked at the divorce petition on my desk. She knew I owned Northline 13 months ago? Yes. Rachel explained that Natalie had begun assembling financial records well before Christmas. Corporate registration documents. Property holding LLC information. Insurance schedules. Estimated company valuations. Even notes comparing Northline's revenue against similar regional contractors. She wasn't guessing, Rachel said. She knew you were the owner. I said nothing. For 8 years, Natalie had asked me to let her father believe I was just a field employee. For 8 years, I had accepted jokes about my work because she said revealing the truth would create problems for her family. And at some point, while I was still playing the role she had asked me to play, she had started gathering documents showing exactly how valuable the role actually was. What did she ask you to certify? A document describing your ownership position as primarily operational rather than controlling. That's false. That's why I wouldn't sign it. Rachel said Natalie had argued the description was only preliminary. That ownership structure could be clarified during discovery. Rachel did not like that. So she walked away. Why contact me now? There was a long pause. Because when I heard the divorce was filed, I realized the description in the petition was similar to the language she tried to get me to certify. I looked again at the line describing me as an executive-level salaried employee. My stomach turned. Christmas Eve had not caused the divorce. The porch had not caused the divorce. Maya defending me had not caused the divorce. Natalie had been preparing to leave for more than a year. And worse, the secret I had spent 8 years keeping for her had stopped being a secret to her long before she stopped asking me to keep it. Do you still have records? Yes. Don't send them to me. Rachel hesitated. Why? Send them to Mason Reed. I gave her his number. Then I hung up and sat alone in my office. For years, I thought Natalie's lie about who I was had been about protecting her family from the truth. Now I understood it might have been about protecting her strategy from me. Rachel sent everything to Mason. Mason sent it to Grace Chun. Grace spent 6 days reviewing the records against our joint accounts, Northline filings, and the documents Rachel had preserved. She called me the morning her report was finished. Evan, I found something you need to see. Her report was 41 pages. The number that mattered was on page 6. $312,000. Over the previous 16 months, Natalie had moved that amount out of our joint savings in a series of irregular transfers. Not one large withdrawal. Dozens. Some labeled. Household reserve. Estimated taxes. Family expenses. From there, the money went into a high-yield account in Natalie's name. Then most of it moved again into a brokerage account opened under her maiden name. Langford. I stared at the timeline. She was hiding it. Grace was careful. I would phrase it differently. Of course she would. The pattern is consistent with concealment or dissipation of marital assets in anticipation of divorce. That's accountant language for hiding it. It's accountant language for letting the court decide what the evidence means. Fair enough. The worst part was the timing. The transfers had started around the same period Natalie began collecting documents about Northline. This was not someone panicking after Christmas Eve. It was preparation. Mason filed an amended response to the divorce petition. Attached: Grace's forensic report, Rachel's sworn statement, corporate ownership records, the preliminary Northline audit documentation. 3 days later, Stephen Caldwell withdrew as Natalie's attorney. Mason would not speculate about why. He has his own professional obligations. Natalie hired new counsel within the week. Lauren Bishop. Sharp. Direct. No theatrics. Her first call to Mason lasted less than 15 minutes. My client is prepared to discuss settlement. That was how I found out Natalie's strategy had finally changed. For 13 months, she had been preparing to control the narrative. Now the documents were controlling it for her. The Northline investigation finished in February. Grace's review confirmed enough evidence against Trevor and Blake for Mason to refer both files to the district attorney. Trevor's fuel card records were not accounting mistakes. Blake's duplicate invoices were not clerical errors. They were documented patterns. Both were terminated after HR completed its process. What mattered to me just as much was what happened to everyone else. 28 Langford-connected employees had clean files. They kept their jobs. A few were moved under different managers to remove family-related conflicts, but nobody lost a paycheck because of their last name. Omar asked me whether I was sure. Yes. Even after Christmas? Especially after Christmas. I had spent 8 years being judged because Richard thought he knew what kind of man drove an old truck and wore work boots. I was not going to make the same mistake in reverse. Blood was not evidence. Conduct was. Trevor and Blake had made choices. The district attorney could decide what those choices amounted to legally. The others had done their jobs, so they continued doing them. There was no satisfying purge. No company-wide revenge speech. Just 11 reviewed files, confirmed violations where the evidence supported them, and consequences matched to what each person had actually done. Mason had been right. Justice was much less dramatic than theater. It was also much harder to argue with. The divorce settled in March. I am not going to pretend it was clean. Nothing involving 13 months of planning, hidden transfers, and a 16-year-old caught in the middle ends cleanly. But Natalie did not get the version she had tried to engineer. The court had Grace's report, Rachel's statement, the ownership records, the actual financial history. Natalie received what the law entitled her to, not what the strategy had been designed to extract. She moved back in with Richard and Elaine. Maya stayed primarily with me. Not because I demanded it. At 16, her preference mattered, and she made hers clear. We rented a townhouse with a working furnace, 2 bedrooms, and absolutely nothing impressive about it. Maya loved it. A week after we moved in, I asked whether she wanted anything from her mother's house. Maybe my books. Anything else? She thought about it, then shook her head. No. That answer stayed with me. After everything that had happened, Maya did not care about furniture, clothes, or the expensive things Natalie thought made a life look successful. She wanted the things that were hers. The books. her room at my place, and a door nobody would make her stand outside of again. Richard called me one more time. March 8th. 11:17 in the morning. I had blocked his personal number, so he used another one and left a voicemail. I listened to it once. That was enough. Evan, I want to apologize. His voice sounded older. Quieter. I didn't know about Northline. I didn't know who you really were. I stopped the recording there, because that sentence told me he still did not understand. Richard thought the problem was that he had mistaken a wealthy business owner for a working-class employee. He thought discovering my title had changed the moral equation. It hadn't. He had mocked my clothes because he thought they were cheap. Mocked my truck because it was old. Mocked my work because it involved tools, crawl spaces, and dirty hands. And now that he knew Northline brought in millions, suddenly, I deserved an apology. That was not remorse. That was recalculation. The truth was simpler. Richard had never been wrong because he thought I was poor. He had been wrong because he believed being poor made someone safe to disrespect. My money did not make what he did cruel. It only made the consequences reach him. I never called back. I did not send a speech. I did not explain the lesson he should have learned. For 8 years, I had wasted too much energy hoping Richard Langford would eventually see me correctly. By March, I no longer needed him to. I saved the voicemail. Not because I treasured the apology. Because it reminded me of the exact moment I stopped confusing recognition with respect. 7 months after Christmas Eve, Maya finished her sophomore year with a 3.8 GPA. That summer, she got a part-time job with a landscaping company. Not Northline. Her choice. She came home the first week with dirt under her fingernails and a sunburn across her nose. Hard day. She dropped her work gloves on the counter. Yeah. You going back tomorrow? Obviously. I smiled. We ate dinner together twice a week, even when my schedule got ugly. We talked more honestly in that rented townhouse than we ever had in the bigger house Natalie and I spent years trying to make look successful. Northline had its strongest first quarter in company history. We had roughly $14.3 million in potential contracts moving through the pipeline. Omar got a promotion. Grace stayed on as an outside compliance advisor. And I kept driving the same old Silverado. A few weeks ago, I took it to a meeting with a commercial property group that could become one of Northline's largest clients. Their CEO met me in the parking lot. He looked at the dented rear bumper. Then at me. Good truck. Still runs. We went inside. 2 hours later, we had the deal. Driving home, I thought about Richard laughing at that truck for 8 years. Back then, I believed the mature thing was letting people misunderstand me. I know better now. There is a difference between not needing approval and allowing disrespect to become normal. Maya taught me that on a porch in 14-degree weather. I had enough money to replace the Silverado 100 times over. I could fix the bumper tomorrow. But every time I look at that dent now, I remember something useful. Nothing about me changed when the Langfords discovered what I owned. Only their behavior did. And by then, their opinion had finally become worthless to me.